just, I just, I just speak my peace, keep my peace.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 73 of the Speak My Peace podcast. As always, I'm your grateful host, Greg Lacey. Like we always do about this time, I hope that this episode is reaching you all in good health. I hope that you all are still taking the proper precautions to protect yourself and your loved ones. This virus is still out there. We're experiencing a second wave here in the United States. I believe the same thing is going on internationally. I know in like Europe and other continents and other countries as well. So I hope that, we continue to stay vigilant as we continue to battle this invisible virus. I shouldn't say invisible because that makes it seem like it's not real. As we continue to battle this deadly virus, because that's important, man. We just got to stay alive. With that being said, welcome to the Speak My Peace podcast. If it's your first time listening, if it's not, welcome back. I'm glad I was able to retain your listenership and viewership. For those of you listening on audio, this is the first week that we're starting to introduce the Speak My Peace podcast to YouTube. The Speak My Peace podcast will be viewable on YouTube starting this episode 73. So if you prefer to watch podcasts rather than listen, definitely check out the podcast at Speak My Peace TV. If you follow me on social media at Speak My Peace Pod on Instagram, if you click the link in my bio, it'll take you straight to it, to where you're able to subscribe. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to my page. Subscribe. If you listen on any other outlet, even if it's not YouTube, make sure you are subscribing to the Speak My Peace podcast. I would really appreciate it. Before I start off this podcast, last episode I was speaking about a website that I was using as I was going through my process of filling out my ballot for the election last week or the week prior, whatever the case it is may be, and I couldn't remember the website that I was using to find my information I needed. I told you I spoke in depth about how I use this website to read upon the representatives that I was voting for, the measures I was voting on or against, the props that I was voting on or against, and all these other good things. And I found this website that was helping me get through it and helping me like pre-select my selections on my ballot prior to filling it out. And that website is votersedge.org. Once again, that website is votersedge.org. This is not an ad. This is a shameless plug. Huge shout out to them, because without that website, my process filling out my ballot probably would have been way more difficult than it should have been. I probably would have elected against filling out my ballot, but because I found that website, I was able to fill it out. So huge shout out to them. Now to get into the thick of things, man, we got a lot of stuff we got to cover. There's a lot of things have developed since last week, and we're going to try to touch upon all of it. This is going to be a very long episode, but we're going to get through it. So y'all stick with me. The first thing I want to touch on is one of the things I spoke about last week was the importance of knowing everything that's on the ballot, whether it's the measures, the props, the representatives, the president, is having that in-depth knowledge. And that's why I started this episode off with plugging the website that I use. And as a result, I see that a lot of people also did the same thing, or I hope did the same thing. It appears that a lot of people did the same thing as far as doing their in-depth knowledge and their research on just things that was being offered and people who were running. And the reason why I say that is because we saw, especially here stateside, or locally, I should say, in California, we saw a lot of things get passed that you would have to have been paying attention to it in order for it to get passed or to get voted against. Just because there was a lot of stuff that was on the ballot that was just, it was confusing. Even with me using the website that I spoke about, like there was still some measures, still some props that doing all my research, I still can decide what to vote on. And so one of the main things I want to jump into, let me say, I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer. That's my forewarning to start this episode. I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer. I know a lot of y'all listen to this podcast. I've been listening for a while. And I know I don't have too much to say as far as the former president or soon to be former president or the soon-to-be new president. I'm not going to use this episode to be a Debbie Downer or negative Nancy, just because I understand the time we're in. Like, I have to read the room. I understand that we are in a time of rejoice. A lot of people are happy. A lot of people have great hope for the future of this racist country. A lot of people are just in great moods after being in such a negative state because of the leadership of this free world. And I understand that. And I'm not going to be the person to come in like, yeah, y'all happy, but blah, 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 blah. Like, that would be weird. So I'm definitely happy that people are happy and that people have hope for the future of this country. So I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer. I'm gonna say what I have to say, but I'm not going to stay on whatever I have to say for too long. But before we even get into the national election and the stuff that surrounded that, because there's a lot of weird stuff that has developed since then. I want to touch on the props and the measures that were passed in my state and in other states as well. The first thing I want to talk about was California voting to restore the right of parolees. I thought I was surprised, for one, that it was passed, but I was glad to see it because we hear it so many times that jail at prison is used as a form of reforming for inmates, to where you go in there and you contribute to whatever they have you contribute to, and you come out a better person, and you come out to lead a better life that you was living prior. And we know in a lot of cases that's not what the outcome is, because at the end of the day, these prisoners, and I'm not sitting here, showing compassion for people who are out committing crimes and thinking that they should be, given a silver spoon or being pampered or things like that. But I do understand that that form of slavery of what prison is. I understand that it's posed as a sense of reformment, so where people are, taken out of society, and then they are put in there to either become a better person or put in there to be taken away from society for the rest of their life. In a lot of cases, we understand that the majority of what a prison is just a business. It's a way of labor, very, very cheap labor for a lot of big companies, and that's just what it is. They don't really care about the reforming process. And so that's one reason why I think that this California voting to restore the right of parolees is important, because when we think about reform, we think about, someone who may have committed a crime, that they may have been a victim of the circumstances. They may not. They may have intentionally committed the crime, but they did whatever they did and they served the time. And now, it's time for them to get back in society. And now they have to make a living for themselves. Now they have to find a form of employment to take care of themselves. Maybe that family that they left behind prior to being locked up. Maybe they want to, pursue a higher education once they get out, because they've grown a love for education as they were in prison. Or maybe that's what the last thing they were doing prior to going to prison. That amongst many other things. I think when you restore the right to vote, it allows them to feel like a member of society. Because for one, they pay taxes and they contribute to society. They're forced to find a job within a certain amount of time. They're forced to behave in a certain way within society for this certain amount of time. And so I think when you contribute all these things that are required from parolees, when you take away a simple thing like voting, it's sad, because you think about measures being passed. Maybe there's a measure being passed on legalizing marijuana. Maybe they went to prison for selling marijuana. And so when you think about, you give a parolee opportunity to vote on something like that, to prevent, another young man who may be out there hustling, doing the same thing that they were doing at a young age. And when you legalize something like that, then when that inmate is able to vote on that, that deletes, or that not diminishes. That right there creates opportunity for them to change someone else's future because they understand that the circumstances that other person, that young person who may currently be in it, may be dealing with or may be up against. And understanding that, there's a better way to it. And one, that it may not be that serious for them to throw their life away for it. And so that's huge. When you think about measures being passed for that parolee who may have children, who may be going to school, there may be measurements or props that are being offered to where, funds to their child or children's school is being offered, and they want to vote on it. They want to contribute to that to make sure that get passed so that their child has the best opportunities and the best resources as they're growing up. So that's definitely huge. Huge shout out to California for voting on that. Another thing that my state voted on is they voted no on stricter parole sentences. I also thought that was big because we know in this country, not just California, countrywide, that black and brown people are not. Black and brown people are often subjected to very strict parole sentences for crimes that are not that serious, whether it's for crimes that should be misdemeanors, and then they're put on parole or they're given a terrible DA and they have to fight a case, and the DA is telling them, take this plea deal, and the plea deal is just something that says, you do time served, but you'll be on parole for the next 15 years. Anybody in their right mind, or any adult in their right mind, or anybody who may have been, in that situation knows that that's a shitty deal. But this 18-year-old kid who is scared to go to prison and was doing something as just selling drugs, maybe just selling weed, and it's not really, and I'm saying a bunch of controversial things in this podcast and this episode, and I understand that, but I really don't deem, distributing marijuana, trafficking marijuana, whatever the case would be, to be that harmful. Especially now that we see so many states in this country legalizing marijuana. So huge shout out to California for voting no on that. And on that same note, huge shout out to New Jersey, South Dakota, and Arizona for voting to legalize recreational weed. Because as I said, I don't see that to be a drug that to be very harmful. And now we are like, out of 50 states, I believe it's like 17 states now legalize recreational use of weed. So that's big because we know a lot of black and brown people are also serving extensive terms in prison off that same thing. That same thing that a lot of these big companies owned by white people are profiting off and making billions of dollars off of now. There are millions for every dollar that these millionaires are making off this industry, there's a body in prison for every dollar within that million who are serving very extensive and very intensive crimes. Time periods in prison for those same things. So huge shout out to just the country, period, for progressing in that sense. I hope that as we move forward in legalizing the recreational use of weed, a lot of these sentences are repealed. A lot of people are able to come home to their families, and I just hope that calls for a better tomorrow for a lot of people who are now profiting off of the same hustle that a lot of people in these minority and underprivileged communities just use just to get by. So huge shout out to all those states that passed it. And on that same note, huge shout out to Oregon for decriminalizing all drugs. Yes, all drugs. That's weed, that's coke, that's meth, that's heroin. They decriminalize all drugs. I don't know how long this has been in conversation. I don't know how long the people of Oregon were pushing for it. But that's huge. Aside from just the people who are being arrested and being harassed and sentenced to these extensive periods in prison of imprisonment due to this, we know that this country is fighting a addiction battle right now. And as much as I may clown about it, as much as I may not care for it, as far as the opioid crisis, there is something going on in this country right now in regards to drugs, to where people are just getting addicted to it for reasons that may not be their fault, whether it's stuff that's been prescribed to them as a result of an injury or as a result of just a simple doctor visit. There are people who are out there getting hooked on drugs, and they can't overcome it. And for me, for the past couple of years, I've been big on this country opening up more mental health clinics. Um, we know a huge percentage of these transients within this country, the people that's living on the streets, have been on the streets for many years because they don't have anywhere to go. But the real reason why they are on the streets is because they have problems that they need help with, and because this country once, had outlets or had alternatives for those people, they had to get rid of it because people were abusing their powers. People were in these clinics. People were in these, I don't know what you want to call them. I guess just clinics. People were in these clinics abusing these people because they've never dealt with these type of situations before, and they didn't understand that the people within those clinics who were subjected to those clinics, they didn't want to cause harm to anyone, but they just didn't know any better. And so I don't know what long term effect Oregon is going to have on the rest of this country, but it's definitely going to be a domino and something big that's moving forward. Whether it's the drug trade within this country, because we know as much as Number 45 tried to paint a picture of undocumented immigrants coming from Mexico just smuggling drugs and stuff. This country has a huge history, has a long history of dealing with the smuggling of drugs from the country south of our border as well. Just because of how much money is within that industry. And so as much as this country tries to penalize or tries to paint a picture of people coming from a certain area, the only reason why they do that is because America has knowledge of what's down there, because America deals in that. America gives them guns in exchange for drugs. This is not the first time this has happened. This happened back in the 70s and the 80s with America and their dealings with Contra. America was giving other countries guns in exchange for drugs and bringing them back to communities. And so I hope that whatever long-term effect Oregon has on this country, that black and brown people in this country are able to profit off that. And huge shout out to Jay-Z. I didn't get to speak about it last week because last week was focused on what we were dealing with, but Jay-Z has launched his own, I don't even know what to call it because it's like an online shop. I guess it's not his own brand of weed, but it's his own weed shop, I guess you can call it. I'm going to speak on it more in length later when I get more details on it. But huge shout out to Jay-Z for, someone who was previously a hustler and has been very detailed about his past, dealings with hustling, now is in the business of legally hustling these drugs. So huge shout out to him for getting his hand in that. We need to see more black people, more black and brown entrepreneurs, taking advantage of this thing who has crippled our communities for so long, because we definitely need that. If anybody should be profiting off that, it should be us, because if anybody was hurt off of that, if anybody was victims of those same things, it was our families. So huge shout out to Oregon and that domino that it has caused in this country for the next decade, because I know we for sure are going to see other things fall. California may be one. I know we're a very progressive state as well, and just a proximity into Oregon, I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Colorado, I believe, was the first state that legalized recreational weed. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know why I'm saying weed. I wouldn't be surprised to see Colorado and have their hands in doing the same thing. So huge shout out to Oregon once again. I can't stress enough how big what they did was for the rest of this country, and for our people. Now, that's really all I had in regards to all the measures or the notable measures and stuff that I seen pass this past week as a result of election week. Now we can really get into the thick of things. We're 20 minutes in. I can share my opinions. I can share my thoughts on everything in regards to the election. But before I do all that, I got a message for y'all.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
I speak on being different. I speak on embracing being different. And without further ado, I'm different. Who different?
That, ladies and gentlemen, is your presidential elect telling you all that if you don't vote for him, you are simply not black. And that was one reason amongst many why I did not vote for anybody in this presidential election. Now, I said I wasn't going to be a Debbie Downer, and I'm not, but I'm just giving you one of my reasons. I've said long before leading up to this election that I just didn't feel like he was the man. I felt that as soon as Obama left the office, we had two options from not his lineage, but from his tree, that we wanted to replace him to lead this country, just because of how great of a time we had with him leading this country for 2 terms, that we just wanted someone that resembled his leadership or resembled him. And those 2 options was his wife and his vice president. Those were the immediate 2 options. Immediately following his termination, or his the end of his second term of leaving the office, President Obama I'm talking about, neither of them ran. Michelle Obama, I don't blame her. And I spoke about this in previous episodes, but I'm just rehashing it for my new listeners. Michelle Obama, as soon as his term ended, she told us, I'm not running for president. I appreciate all the love and support, but that's not happening. And I don't blame her, because we see what that 8 years of presidency did to Obama. All those gray hairs that got added to his head, all that stress of him, trying to fight the House of Representatives and fight to get things passed and fighting for our people. Not even fighting for our people, fighting for our country. We see how much stress that caused him. And so I don't blame her for not doing that. His vice president, I don't remember exactly the reason why Joe Biden did a run immediately following the election. He probably just felt like it was too soon. But here we are, 4 years removed from the end of Obama's second term, and our presidential elect is his former vice president. And leading up to that, leading up to the Democratic National Convention, I always felt like those were our short shots, Michelle Obama and Joe Biden. And one was ruled out, and one we didn't know too much about. And because of that, I felt like it was their election to lose, because so many people wanted either of them just so that we can have some sense of President Obama. And so as things started getting heated up, and remember, Joe Biden threw his name in the hat very late, but people had an inkling that he was going to try to run. And it was literally, as far as the Democratic National Convention, it was literally his race to lose. And I believe that he truly lost that. From the first debate, I felt like he got stumped on by someone who was now his vice president. Shout out to Kamala Harris. He got mashed by her, and it was bad. It was terrible. And then following that, or even I think it was leading up to that, we had the accusations of sexual assault and sexual harassment. So everything just looked kind of murky for him. It was like, this is yours to lose, and you literally just fumbled it. You had the loss at the Democratic National Convention. You had the sexual assault and sexual harassment charges be brought up. You had people starting to bring up the fact that you have dementia and don't remember too much, and your memory is not that large. What other things that happened? I think the things that he started to do within the black community, it just didn't look right with me, and I think he lost a lot of support. And it was sad that Bernie didn't gain enough traction, because Bernie Sanders was the people's favorite, but I think the Democratic National Convention just didn't want to get behind him, because a lot of the plans that he was pushing, a lot of the topics he was pushing, a lot of the agendas that he was pushing, they literally did not want to deal with having to try to fight with him or for him to back him to get these things passed. And I think that's one of the main reasons why Bernie pulled out, is because he understood that he was up against something that he literally couldn't beat. He tried to beat the first time and he couldn't, because he was going against a woman who it seemed like it was more progressive to have a woman running than him, and so he lost that time. And I'm gonna admit, I didn't really follow the election that first time. The second time, it was this, and he was going up against somebody who was President Obama's understudy, and because of that, the Democratic National Convention wanted him just off of that relationship alone. And then I speak about the people's favorite. Bernie was the younger people's favorite. Biden was the younger people who was voting for Bernie, their parents' favorite. And so, a culmination of all these things, I never felt like Joe Biden was my guy. And so I didn't vote for him. But I also didn't vote for that other pig, that other racist, that other idiot. I'm not going to call Biden an idiot. He's not an idiot. But I didn't vote for that idiot, number 45. And so, I don't even know where I'm going. But hopefully I connect everything. But then when I think about all this thing out there in combination, and then I listen to the clip that I just played y'all, and I hear him say that if you don't vote for me, you're not black. It's just like, all right, now you're kind of getting arrogant. And that's what happens. See, we as black people, we got to stop. Our culture is so influential. Our culture is so, I'm just going to say influential, because the things that we affect outside of our culture is monumental. And because of that, it's like we should be more sacred in who we let within our culture. But we let one white person do one thing that seems cool to us, and we're automatically inviting them to the cookout, or we're automatically, inviting them to Thanksgiving and things like that. And we get sound clips like this, to where he tells us that we ain't black and we're not voting for him. It's like, even if I did vote for the idiot number 45, how is this white man determining my blackness? Like, what authority or what say so does he have in determining that? And it didn't sit right with me, and so I didn't vote for him. But he won, so huge shout out to him. The second clip behind that was 2 Chainz. I spoke about it last week. I'm glad that this election was over, because there's a lot of entertainers, a lot of rappers, a lot of singers shucking and jiving for these presidents, for this president-elect, and for these candidates, I should say. We see it every 4 years when the presidency come around. We see the shucking and jiving from rappers and entertainers. Let me tell y'all one thing. I don't look to rappers for a option, or I don't look to rappers for influence on decisions I need to make in regards to political stances. There are some rappers that are very great at it, but they are more pillars in their community than they are rappers. So when you have somebody like Lil Wayne tweeting about his support for number 45, I'm not surprised. Even as someone who grew up a Lil Wayne fan, Lil Wayne was my favorite rapper up until my teenage years. I'm not surprised by that, because I also think back to 4 or 5 years ago. So Lil Wayne had a interview, and he said some very demeaning things about our people. He said, one, racism is not alive, which he has been a celebrity for the majority of his life. I don't know how old Lil Wayne is now. He may be in his 30s. I believe he is in his 30s, like early or mid 30s. But he's been a celebrity for most of his life. Lil Wayne bursted on the scene at 13, so he's had money for the majority of his life. And I think that he's been in that position for so long that he believes that money has erased the boundaries that are presented to us because of the color of our skin. And I don't think he understands that he may have not been presented certain opportunities because of the color of his skin. Although he's rich, he may have missed out on a lot of money because of the color of his skin. He may be excluded for certain meetings in regards to his career, in regards to business opportunities, because of the color of his skin. They may prefer to deal with somebody who will relate a message to him because they may not think that he will be able to understand that. And I don't think that he can grasp that. It's just like the whole OJ thing. OJ was appalled that people were making his case a race thing, and we had that famous quote that, I'm not black, I'm OJ. Because OJ had been a celebrity for so long, and he has been a pillar, or he has been a member of that Brentwood community, to where he didn't see, air quotes, he didn't see color. He just saw money, and he saw the people that he hung around. And unfortunately, because of that, the people that he hung around did not look like him, and it removes that those humble beginnings that he grew up with. And it's the same thing here with Lil Wayne. And so when we have Lil Wayne supporting this idiot and telling us, he supports this plan, blah, 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 I'm not surprised by that, because again, this is the same idiot who told us that racism wasn't a real thing. And when asked about Black Lives Matter, he said that Black Lives Matter wasn't a real thing because his Black Lives Matter because he was famous. And then he proceeded in that same interview to pull out a big red bandana and said, I forget exactly what he said, but I remember him pulling out a big red bandana and said, "This what matters," or something like that. But my whole point of the case is Lil Wayne's an idiot. He used to be one of my favorite rappers. He, for some, is one of the greatest rappers. But we shouldn't be looking to Lil Wayne for advice on politicians. I mean, just look at his hair. If somebody can't take care of their hair, what makes you think that they should give you advice on how to upkeep this country? And that's just simple. And that's on one side. And we get the other side with this idiot 2 Chainz going out with a performing "I'm Different" at a Joe Biden rally. It's like, you're leading people astray. Because I understand that a lot of people in this country supported Biden and Kamala so hard because of what we were fighting against. But at some point, it's like, people got to be real with themselves and admit that that's the reason why they were supporting that camp so hard. And I have no problem with that, because again, that number 45 needed to be removed, and he needs to be removed. Just because the things he stood for and the things that he has cited within this country, and the conversations that are the type of false sense of pride that he had embellished within this country once again, are allowed to be prevalent once again. And so I do believe that he needed to be removed. But when we have rappers, saying, they support Biden, blah, 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 and not really telling people why they're supporting, and trying to tell kids who look up to them that they should also support them, I think that that's very detrimental, because these kids don't know what they're going into, but they look up to you because they listen to your music for so long, and they fantasize about that lifestyle that you live, that lifestyle that you present to them, and they think of you as a role model because that's what they want. That's the end goal. And so when you lead them blindly down a hole and tell them to align with a certain politician for no reason, just align with this politician, it looks bad. Because what if I'm like a 15-year-old kid right now, and 2 Chainz is my favorite rapper, and he's telling me to support Biden, and then Biden go through his first 4 years in office and it's terrible, and he needs to be removed, and then he runs for president again, and I had no idea about everything that happened during his campaign. But now the next time that he's going for a second term, I'm 19 years old, and it's time to vote for a president. I'm gonna vote for that man because my favorite rapper told me to do that at 15, and I didn't get a chance to do that then. And I don't care what he's pushing, what agenda he's pushing. I don't care what he's done in this past 4 years. I remember his name. I don't care about the other candidates. I don't know the other candidates. But the person who's beefing with my favorite rapper may be aligning with that candidate. And so I'm just going to align with him. So this is why I continue to stress the importance of voter awareness in everything that's being presented to us on the ballot. I think we got to do a better job of influencing and teaching the youth, really the youth, about the things that are being presented to us. Even though I'm not young, I still consider myself young. I've only voted. This is only my second election I voted for. I was eligible for 3, but that's still not a lot. And so when you think about that, I think we had to do a better job at educating ourselves and then also educating the ones who are going to be voting for the first or second time, because that is very important. And that's the reason why the past 2 episodes I was bringing up the Ballad of the Bullet speech by Malcolm X, because that was one very important speech, with him just telling us about what we need to vote for, how we're looking to who we're voting for, the things that we need to do outside of the election, and everything just in regards to that. So that there, it really struck me a kind of way. Everything that was surrounding that election, which is why I'm so glad that it's over. And I'm truly am glad that it's over. Huge shout out to President-elect and Vice President-elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, because we finally got that idiot out of office, kind of. Because we know he's still fighting. And as I said last week as well, I said that we wasn't going to get the elections as soon as we usually do in previous elections. And that was true, because there was a lot of holdup. The idiot started losing in big key states, and he caused a lot of controversy. He started telling states to stop counting votes. He started telling states to start counting votes. The funny thing is that the nigga was literally holding a press conference telling certain states to stop counting votes, and in real time, someone advised him that the states that you're telling them to stop counting votes in, you're losing. And the nigga literally changed his mind. Was like, count the votes, count every vote. And it was a whole mess. For those of you who didn't follow social media, you may have had voters anxiety, so you didn't want to see all the updates. That happened in real time. Alongside of that, he incited people to go out and harass the people who are working in these polling places. Now we know how important these jobs are for these people in these polling places, because it's a lot of pressure on them. And as a result, we had these idiot number 45 supporters marching down to these polling places, trying to get in there and yelling them to stop. And in certain states, they were saying stop the vote. In other states, they were saying count the votes. You really can't make this up. It's really like a scene out of SNL or Seinfeld or whatever the case may be. It was just stupidity. But this was going on in our country. And aside from that, other states were delayed in their ballot counting, because in the midst of the ballot counting, he interfered with just the process of it. He wanted people to go down and monitor, ballots being counted. He started accusing people of, he accused Biden campaign of forging votes and also ushering in fake votes. Said that, votes were being brought in from nowhere. They were dumping fake votes. There were people on social media, quote unquote, witnessing mailman tampering with ballots, and it was a wild place. And it's not even over. It's not really over till January 20th. But I'm so glad that it's nearly over, that we have presidential elects now. And a huge reason and a huge case of that is because of women. The reason why we have a presidential and vice presidential elect now is because they were able to win big in key states that haven't been won by a Democratic Party in a while. 2 of those states being Georgia and Arizona. There was a couple of other states as well, but I really want to focus on Georgia because this allows me to emphasize the importance of black women. Huge shout out to black women, but I don't say that enough. Allow me to use this time to say it again. Huge shout out to black women. Outside of all this election stuff, I was raised by black women. I was nurtured by black women, so I understand the importance of black women on my life and the importance of black women in society as a result. But for this specific case, we're focusing on the black women just in regards to this election. First of all, we got our first black and female vice president elect in Kamala Harris. You don't have to agree with her past. You don't have to agree with whatever she may be offering in the future. But one thing for sure is that she is a black woman. She's a woman, and she's our vice president, the first ever in this country. One for a black person, two for a woman, three for an immigrant. Like, that's huge. We're coming off of a regime of two idiots and vice presidents and president in this office who basically had a war on people who were coming to this country for better opportunities, who had a war on people who were escaping very, 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 very horrible realities in their home countries, and were fleeing to our country as a sense of hope, as a sense of a brighter today or a brighter tomorrow for them and their family. And so when we think about all that, and we think about the case of our vice president being the daughter of an immigrant and being black and being a woman, it's huge. Like, you can't, I don't know if you can put it into words. And I know it's like, what I'm thinking is probably times 10 for what women are thinking or what immigrants are thinking, because this is unheard of. Like, literally compare and contrast when you think about, what we were dealing with, and now, that's those same type of people that they were having a war against. One of the product of that is in a position that one of you idiots held before, and that's huge. And then when you think about the fact that, just think about, huge shout out to Kamala Harris, I said that already, but even speaking about the war on undocumented immigrants in this country, think about the sense of hope that they now have, because their life for the past 4 or 5 years has been a turmoil, because they don't know what tomorrow holds for them. They don't know what tomorrow holds for their family. And even for those who are thinking like that, there were some that were actually separated from their families. There were some people who were in prison for 3 or 4 years in these damn concentration camps in Texas and Arizona and Mexico and stuff like that, and haven't seen their family for a period of time. And some of them have been in this country. Granted, they came here. I try not to use the word illegally because I've been told that's not the correct word to use. But some of them had came here and gained access to this country as undocumented immigrants. And so when you think about that, you think about, how long they may have spent here in this country, undocumented, this country may be all that they know. And they may have been caught and sent back to countries that they have not spent more than 2 years in. And so when you think about that, you think about that families being split up and people have been sent to countries they've never been to before or haven't been to in so long, it's heartbreaking. And so now there may be a sense of hope for those people, because they often have been forgotten. I know I haven't seen them in the news that I watch. I haven't been seeing too many segments on these undocumented immigrants that were separated from their families or that were put in these concentration camps. I don't see it too much. I don't read about it too much either, just because of there's so much other stuff going on in this world that if it leaves my mind sometimes. But time and time again, I think about, like, damn, there are still people who are faced with uncertainty in these positions. They don't know what's about to happen. And now they have a sense of hope. They have a sense of pride in their tomorrow. So huge shout out to, again, black women. Shout out to Kamala Harris, and shout out to this new regime that's about to take over. Another black woman I want to highlight is Stacey Abrams. For those of you who don't know, Stacey Abrams is, she's a lawyer from Georgia who previously ran for, she ran for governor of Georgia in 2018. It was a very controversial race. I don't know if a lot of you remember, but basically she was a Democratic representative who ran for governor of Georgia in 2018 against the current Georgia governor. However, the current Georgia governor was at the time, I believe, like the Secretary of State. And so this is where the controversy came in, because I believe she was leading and she was beating him in the race for a while. But then there was a lot of stuff that was happening in regards to, like, people being deemed ineligible to vote, ballots being deemed ineligible, tampering with ballots, And it was a lot of stuff. And so they had to have, I don't remember if it was a runoff or it was a re-election, but it was something like that for the race in Georgia. And during that time is when a lot of these things happened, where a lot of things came to the front to where ballots were deemed ineligible, or citizens were deemed ineligible, or they wasn't actually registered to vote, and a lot of things like that. And so during this time, she has unfortunately pulled out of the race, and she never conceded. She just pulled out of the race because I remember I read a quote about that during the time about she was saying that if she was to concede, she would have to admit to where that everything that was up against her was correct, and she did not believe that. She believed that because of the person she was running against held a title that caused a conflict interest. She didn't believe that she was up against something that she could beat because of that conflict of interest. And so what she did is just pull out of the race because she understood the monster, the battle that she was up against. And as a result, she didn't win the runoff for the governor of Georgia. And that was this country's, I don't know if it was this country's first lesson in just don't do women of color wrong, especially black women. I can speak that from my experience. I'm trying to think about to just other things that may have happened, and there probably been other things in the country that may have happened. I know that there was something that led to Harriet Tubman creating the Underground Railroad. I forget exactly what the incident was, but that definitely was a lesson. But there's probably plenty of lessons within American history from then until now as well. But this is just the most recent and most current and most relevant lesson, because that controversial race in which the state of Georgia did her dirty, they paid back for her big time, because she pulled out of that race and she dedicated the next 2 years of her life to making sure that nothing like that ever happened again. And as a result, the state of Georgia turned blue for the first time in I don't know how many years. After she lost that race, she shot Siva for 10 days. And for those of you who are not too familiar, I'm not really that familiar, but I understand that it's like a religious practice. It may be Judaism, to where after the loss of a loved one or loss of something, either something or someone significant in your family, you literally just mourn for a certain period of time. And once that's over, it's like a dedicated period of mourning, to where like you get like specific snacks, or you get specific meals, and you just literally just cast yourself out from everyone and don't deal with anyone but yourself, and you're allowed to just soak in your mourning for that period of time. And then once that's over, it's getting back to your life. And so after losing that, or after pulling out of that, she literally shot Siva for 10 days, and then she got on this journey of making sure that all the citizens in Georgia were registered to vote, and that they were actively participating in voting, and that they knew their rights when it came to voting. And the reason why I say that this was one of America's lessons and you just don't mess with black women is because Georgia was one of those states that number 45 really needed. And it was one of those states that he could have counted on, because for so long it has been voting red, which would have been in his favor. But as a result of what happened to Stacey Abrams, I believe in the past 2 years, she got like 85,000 voters. It's some astronomical number of voters in Georgia registered to vote. And I believe the majority of them were black voters. I don't know the percentage of the voters that she got registered, and the percentage of them, how many and who they voted for and how they voted. But I can imagine that majority of the voters she got registered, a huge majority of the voters she got registered, probably voted in favor of the Democratic Party, the party which she was a representative of. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. And so the reason why I say that you just don't mess with black women, this was a black woman scorned. This was a black woman done dirty. And as a result, she took her loss, and she did what she could do to affect what she needed to affect. And as a result, this country lost a racist, or I should say an openly racist president. And that was a lesson that Georgia had to learn the hard way. And so huge shout out to Stacey Abrams for her doing in that, because she dedicated 2 years of her life to literally just making sure that that situation never happened again for her, make sure that situation never happened for anyone, but also showing the importance of what happened when we get out to vote. I know it's like me being a hypocrite because I didn't vote for any president, but the importance of the influence of our communities is monumental, because a lot of these candidates, they either hope that we don't vote so that we don't cause any type of like influence on, you know, what they're counting for. So when you think about a state like Georgia, majority of the population is probably Caucasian. The majority of the population is Caucasian. You can count on a state like that to vote for this idiot, because the majority of the population in that state is registered to vote in his favor, and they probably actually care about that. So when you have people who are oppressed in voting, people who are not, you know, given their voting rights, people who don't know that they should be out of register, people who don't know that they aren't registered, people who don't know that their ballots can be deemed ineligible, once they get involved, it causes a huge shift in the way things are supposed to carry out. And we seen how that played out there. We seen how that played out in Arizona as well, but we're focusing on Georgia right now because we are focusing on the shout out and the importance of Black women to this country. So huge shout out to Stacey Abrams, because she definitely caused a huge ripple in this election. Whether people want to admit it or not, I know I follow a lot of like Black outlets on social media, not new, like media outlets. And so when I woke up in the morning, when it was determined that we had a presidential elect, the majority of them was calling that day Stacey Abrams Appreciation Day, and I didn't really understand what was going on. I had to read into everything else, but that was like when I got on Instagram that morning, the majority of things I seen was giving praise to Stacey Abrams. And because I wasn't following election really, or the election results really, I didn't know what was going on. And then I later found out what was going on, and I was like, wow. Like, even before reading into all the things, I was like, okay, Georgia turned blue. A lot of people are happy. These are the counties, and a lot of the counties that were monumental in, you know, the turning of Georgia are counties that I know that are hugely populated by Black people, because I got friends that are either from that county or that speak about that county or that have friends in that county. So I know that the majority of people in those counties are Black. And so when I read that, and then I thought about like, oh shoot, Stacey Abrams, I remember her name. This is a lady who was done wrong so many years ago, and now she's causing a effect in the national election. I'm pretty sure nobody's going to do her bad again, because if this is a result of that, you can only imagine what she's done, what she can do with even a huger platform. And she showed us. She came up and she showed us. I think that's really all I have for you all this week. I said I was going to get into a lot, and I feel like I covered a lot in regards to like the election, my thoughts on the election, the influences of the election. I've given my props, whether I'm supporting them or not. I gave my props to the new president-elect and the vice president-elect. And that's really all I have for the week. Everything I really wanted to cover was in regards to election. So thank you. Thank you all for tuning in to the Speak My Peace podcast. Again, this is my first episode on YouTube. So if you want to watch, definitely follow me at Speak My Peace TV on YouTube. Thank you all who are listening on audio, whether it's Spotify, Stitcher, Google, Apple, whatever the case may be. Make sure you're subscribing and leaving ratings and leaving comments on my podcast. I definitely appreciate the feedback. I can't stress enough how important that is. My what to watch for this week, I think I gave y'all Fargo last week. Dang, do I not have a what to watch for this week? If I gave y'all Fargo last week, this week I'm going to give y'all, I don't have a what to watch for this week. And I'm kind of mad because I definitely had one leading up to this podcast. All right, y'all gonna have to, I gave y'all like 4 in 1 week, 2 weeks ago. So I don't have a what to watch for the week, and I'm kind of mad about that. But my best kept secret for this week, we're gonna get into some Flip De Niro. My best kept secret for this week is flip the narrow, no, no, no. Once again, my best kept secret for this week is flip the narrow, no, no, no. That's our Speak My Peace podcast for this week. I'm out.